Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I'm Andrew Perchuk, Deputy Director of the Getty Research Institute, and I want to welcome everyone to tonight's program, Monet Hates Me, Tacita Dean in conversation with Anne Rana. I say that complicated hello because I'm very pleased to say that we have viewers in South America, Asia, Australia joining us, as well as some very tired people from Europe and the Middle East. And I think it's important, as we talk about place, for me to acknowledge that I currently am standing on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territories of the Tongva and Gabrielino peoples. I'm particularly pleased to welcome everybody tonight because we at the GRI have a long history and relationship with Tacita Dean. Tacita was our artist-in-residence in 2014 to 2015. And during that time, we asked her to produce an artist book. We're still waiting for that artist book. But all kidding aside, the reason to work with really good artists is because they don't give you what you ask for, they give you something better. And that's what we have, this extraordinary exhibition in a box, Monet Hates Me. And while the limited edition, I think is in today's art world, offered at a very fair price by Tacita's galleries. Tacita was also very committed to the idea that everyone should be able to have a copy of Monet Hates Me. And so the Getty, along with Koenig, produced a trade edition of Monet Hates Me, which is available on the Getty website or wherever you buy your books. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Anne Rana, an independent scholar, but a former close associate of ours at the GRI, who worked closely at her time at the GRI with Tacita on this edition. So Annie, please take it away.
Thank you, Andrew. Hello, everyone. I'm Anne Rana, and thank you for joining us today. I'm very pleased to be here with Tacita speaking together this afternoon. As Andrew mentioned, Tacita Dean was the Getty Research Institute's artist-in-residence from 2014 to 2015. Her project while at the Getty was entitled The Importance of Objective Chance as a Tool of Research, which meant that she allowed chance to be the guiding principle of her research within the GRI's special collections. The result of Tacita's time in the archives is a two-part project, Monet Hates Me, which incorporates and reflects the diverse source material she came across during this period. Let me start to share my screen here so we can look at some images. And hopefully we can all see that. The first part of Tacita's project is what she conceived of as an exhibition in a box. This is an artist edition of 100 cloth-bound and foil-embossed boxes published by the GRI in association with Koenig Books in Cologne. Each box contains 50 artworks or objects, as Tacita referred to them, created from the GRI's archival holdings. The objects vary in medium and dimension, and some are unique to each box. Tacita designed and produced the edition, working intensively with her longtime friend and collaborator, Martyn Ridgewell, during the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns between March and December of 2020. Tacita was in Berlin for this period and Martyn in Cornwall, England. And here you're seeing this exhibition in a box, indeed as exhibition, with the 50 objects installed at Tacita's galleries this past fall in Paris at the Librairie Marion Goodman, and at Marion Goodman Gallery in New York, and at Frith Street Gallery in London. The second component of Tacita's project is an artist book or trade edition, also entitled Monet Hates Me. designed by Martyn Ridgewell and published by the GRI. The book expands upon Tacita's aleatoric research process behind the edition. It brings together select images of the original source material from special collections, along with a number of texts written by Tacita, which shed light on the pull of her various archival discoveries. Her writings include personal anecdotes, assorted recollections, and research rabbit holes, as she referred to them, altogether creating a broad constellation of connective threads. The book also includes a reprint of what we refer to as the key, which we'll be looking at shortly, which is a small book in the edition that provides details on the provenance and manufacture of the other boxed objects. I had the good fortune of being Tacita's research assistant at the GRI while she was in residency back in 2014, and worked with her again more recently, providing research on the source material she incorporated into Monet Hates Me as the projects coalesced over the pandemic period. So it's a pleasure to be here today and discuss this all further together. And just to note that following our conversation, we'll have some time at the end for questions, and you're welcome to submit any questions into the Q&A space at any point in the program. I'd like to quickly thank the GRI's excellent programming lead, Jennifer De La Fuente, and everyone at the Getty who's been involved in the planning of the program, including Michelle Chacho, managing editor of GRI Publications, who's also been a fantastic colleague in the Monet Hates Me endeavor throughout the years. And thank you to John Keefe in Getty Digital, who photographed the vast trove of material that Tacita selected from the collections. So we're dispensing with more formal introductions this afternoon, but I will say briefly that Tacita Dean is a British European artist who was born in 1965 in Canterbury. She lives and works in Berlin and Los Angeles. So welcome, Tacita, whom I'd like to thank for making time for this event, knowing your relentlessly busy schedule. You are able to come on. Hi, Tacita. So I'll put up this image from a spread in the artist's book, which speaks to some of the recurring motifs that emerged in your archival explorations and meanderings. You write in one of your early texts that you, quote, more often identify my reasons for making a work at the end of the process rather than the beginning. In this case, though, you had to identify your scholarly project in advance of arriving to the Getty. So perhaps you can begin by elaborating upon your proposal of embracing chance as a methodology and how this informed your experience within the archives.
When I was invited to be an artist in residence, I didn't understand quite that you had to have a scholarly pursuit in order to, and the Getty was quite insistent about that. So I came up, you know, as you know, in my working life, I've often used chance and especially kind of objective chance in a sort of dilettante way of, you know, just letting chance guide my parkour, as it were. And so I came up with the idea of maybe the best thing to do if I don't have any sort of, you know, ideas as to what I could investigate in this, you know, overwhelming special collections that the GRI houses, would just be to do it randomly. So that's why I came up with the, you know, the idea of the importance of objective chance as a tool of research. Mm-hmm. You know, because everyone else turned up with, you know, very, very particular projects that they were working on for sort of decades, some of them. So I came in the opposite way, and I just, you know, I remember that the first thing I did with one of your former colleagues, Peter Bonfito, we went down to sort of like the lower second or third level, and I literally pointed to a box, and he dutifully went up a ladder and got it down. And in that box was the key to Auguste Rodin's studio, literally. And it was in the, you know, the collection of Melina Hoffman, who is a sculptor, and more than that, actually. But I mean, and so, but mainly that, and had been a student of Rodin. And so within her papers was this literal key, and, you know, and because it literally became the key. You know,
why don't we take a look? Yeah,
is the book the key, and this is the size. This is actually the scale of the key. This is it. This is exactly the size of it. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, so that kind of affirmed my whole idea. You know, the proposal to do, you know, to actually investigate something completely randomly. And that's how it began. And, you know, and also in a, you know, you told me it was in a separate box, but my memory was all in one box. But another box in the same papers was a lock of Rodin's hair as well. So
pull that up, which you chose to reproduce in the book as well, with some accompanying texts.
yeah, well, the funny thing about that, and I reread the entire book this morning in preparation for this, because, you know, Rodin, along with the key and the hair, was this rose that had been pressed, and I called it Rodin's rose because it was, you know, and she had kept this. Malvina Hoffman had kept it, and you know, she said, you know, written in French on the envelope, this is the rose that, you know, that Rodin had kindly given me, and but then I realized, of course, the whole story was, you know, also there was a letter inside from another of Rodin's suitors, because obviously he was a womanizer, and
right.
But of course, Rodin's rose really does refer more to, you know, his wife, his partner for all those years, Rose Burat. I think that's her name. But you know, so there's, you know, playing with the, you know, the double on top, but finding the rose and then, you know, taking me onto the other rose in his life, and the other suitors in his life, or the other women in his life. Obviously, everyone knows about Gwen John. Right,
but the other letter that you came across from Claire Couder,
yeah,
the Duchesse de Choiseul, that was interesting as well. Which was sort of exploring Hoffman to go see if Rodin was home and to report back.
Yeah, I mean, she was a piece of work, I think, that woman. It was, so that was interesting to go, you know, to follow, because she was an American with a French title,
right?
And obviously, and she'd married a sort of French aristocrat. I think they were broke, and because Rodin, you know, never married Rose.
Right.
In fact, he only did it in the last 2 weeks of her life.
Right.
I think everyone was very worried that she would lay claim to the entire estate.
Right. I think you found a telegram from announcing Madame Rodin's death.
Was also in the box.
In Melina Hoffman's box too.
But that was the first time where she was Madame Rodin.
Right.
You know. So yeah, that was just the contents of box number 1.
Okay.
It was very exactly. But the way the whole, you know, looking down at the rose, I mean, the whole way we organized the book in the end. I mean, I wrote these texts, some of them about the objects in the edition, some of them not, some about photographs that we didn't manage to make into an object. And then the whole book, how the book is made, and I have, you know, is that, you know, these were the photographs that were literally the photographs that were my working photographs. And so we just reproduced them in the book exactly as they were taken by John Kiffey. And he, you know, I just want to say that he took them all as you know, negative. They're all negatives.
Right. 4x5.
Yeah. So they weren't, you know, they're not digital images. So I just had the photographs printed in Berlin on both black and white and color, every photograph I took. Because I mean, basically what I did was I would be just following these trails in Getty collection, in the special collection, you know, some of them completely random, you know, going through strange letters, and then if I saw something strange or odd, I would take an iPhone picture, and then later we'd have to try and refine the source, and you know, and I mean, I was, you know, it wasn't all as random as just pointing to a box. I mean, sometimes there were things that Peter suggested. You helped me, you know, I was looking for clouds for another reason, and then that became another way of kind of you know, navigating randomly, you know, because the clouds brought me, you know, threw up Ruskin and, you know, Jeff Hendricks and all sorts of people, and of course alchemy, which was a pet love of mine anyway. I've, you know, for many years I've been interested in alchemy. So, you know, it was quite a delight, because the point about special collections is, you know, that it's quite an eccentric collection. You know, I know that the scholars don't like me to say this, but I think it's very particular in the way that it seems to have a bit of everything in it, which I really, you know, really strange mix of things, which normally would not be the case, I don't think, in sort of, it doesn't have a specialty, not really, because it's been accumulated over many decades, which is why I liked it so much. I mean, it really is it is a many rabbit holes. I mean, it's got some incredible things in it, but it's overwhelming, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll get a sense of that range of all the various archives that you incorporated bits and pieces from. But let's maybe just go back to the title, Monet Hates Me, if you wanted to explain that origin.
Well, I just came across these letters, and I don't think the Getty has very many of Monet's letters to Camille Pissarro, and there was, a lot of them were black edge. I think I could, you know, which for me was about, I mean, I think one of the wife, I think, had died. I can't remember, but anyway, so they were kind of bereavement letters, or appeared to be, or not. It was quite strange. I mean, sometimes they were just reusing kind of bereavement stationery. And I just, at the end of this letter, it literally said, you know, I mean, what you're looking at on the screen there is what it is the transcription
embossed on the cover of the box.
Yeah, of Monet's handwriting, and it looked to me like it said, "Hate Tacita." I know that's very aggrandizing, but I just took it as a joke, and I sent it to someone, and I just said, "Monet hates me," and that just sort of stuck as the title. You know, I think he's trying to say, you know, in French, in tout hat, you know, in all haste, but he's even reversed the hat and the tout. So it's kind of, it's strange, but I think that's what it says. But it does still, to my eye even now, look like it says hate test.
Right. Well, I also think it evinces a certain wry humor that we see in some of the other objects as well. So, well, maybe we should start looking at some of them so we can see. Oh, and this was the original key to Rodin's studio in Malvina Hoffman's archive. So object 7, stamp out stamping. I believe this is the first object that you conceived of, and the first one you made, one of 2 made pre-pandemic, and at the GRI, in fact, and we can look, but this was based on an artwork found within the Jean Brown archive, and Brown was a collector of Dada and Surrealist and Fluxus work, but maybe you can tell us about the trajectory to realizing this object.
Well, it was just it's George Brecht edition. It was just in a box of there were many Fluxus editions that I don't even know how I ended up looking at that box, but I love the sort of stamp out stamping. I just sort of, and it was something I photographed, and then I like the idea of, because the whole project was accumulated over with the idea that it was, even within the box, it would be random. So that's why there are, you know, it's 100 and there are no extra ones, because it all needed to be that number. But you know, there were all these different versions of it. In the end, there are no artist proofs or anything. There are only 100 of these boxes in the world. That's it. And so I got the, you know, and in the end, the actual stamp was too precious. So I actually had to make a facsimile of stamp out stamping, and which I made in Santa Monica here. And then you and me, I bought these, you know, because of course I'm very much, you know, collector of papers from different eras. And I, you know, it took me quite some time to actually find, because there's nothing more difficult to find actually than old postcards and paper. And I mean, I actually love the quality of older papers, and there are quite a few in this edition. And so I was, so I literally laid out 100 cards, and we stamped, you know, and you were with me, and every time I stamped one, and you take that one away, and then and then I went around again, and then you'd remove number 2. So it was literally there. So the first card is once, second card is twice, the third card is 3 times, until you get 100. And what's really important about the actual box is that this is one of the objects that's unique, because if you have box number 1, you get the stamp just 1, but if you have box number 78, you get the one where it's got 78. It's been stamped 78 times.
Right.
So that's one of the unique things about it. And there are another very, very particular thing that's unique about it is that every box has got a unique, one of my unique research photos in it. And then in the end, the key becomes the way of identifying which box you have, because I think it's object, this is just an extra one. But object 2024, which is empty here, would be only the photograph in the book and that numbered. So this would be number 78, this photograph of 78. And that means only this book is unique too, with the photograph. So it's a way of sort of making every single one of these boxes unique as well.
And perhaps you already said this, but that the key tells you the order in which you put the objects, you take them out and put them back into the box.
Yeah, I mean, there's, it's a very precise document, actually.
Right.
This book, because it has, it will show you the picture of the object, and then it will explain the provenance of it. And also, which was very, very much important part of this thing, was the fact that I made this with my old friend Martyn Ridgewell. Together, we did it during lockdown. It's not that we intended to do that, or it's just that that's how it happened. I was alone in my studio at the beginning of the lockdown, and he was in Cornwall and his work had dried up. So we just, the whole idea originally was that it was going to be made very much more commercially by the Koenig books. But in the end, it was just me and Martyn making these things alone. And I would work in Berlin, he would work in Cornwall. And, hand make everything. And, which is not what I imagined I would do had I been given a sort of period of purposeless time. I didn't think I'd be writing "Dear Father Hitler" out 100 times, cutting papers and faking the signatures of Dotremont and all these people. So if you look more images of this is, you see, as you behind that, you can see "Dear Father Hitler."
Well, do you want to jump to that one, or do you want to look at Melina?
Well, Melina Mccurry was a random photograph in Alexander Lieberman box of miscellaneous photographs, and didn't have a context, didn't have why it was there. It wasn't clear really. It wasn't even clear that he took it, right? Actually, so we don't really know, but I have a soft spot for Melina Mccurry because because I immediately knew that I had this connective thread to her. I had to make that one of my objects, and I turned it into a passport photograph.
Right. So
because
So can
well,
you speak to that decision for that format for this one? Well,
I mean, it's more like, I think when we were working on these objects, I think Martyn and I decided that every single one had to be made differently. That no two single materials could be repeated, or no form repeated, really, more or less. So I don't know, I just had this idea that I wanted Melina Mccurry as a passport photograph. And actually, because she lost her, and this is what I mean about allowing chance to intervene, because I didn't know this. I just had an intuitive thing. That's what I wanted to do, make a passport photograph of Melina Mccurry. And then, of course, she lost her statehood,
right.
During the kernels, or the dictatorship in Greece.
Right.
So they took away her Greek nationality, and she was exiled in Paris. So it was completely appropriate that I made a passport photograph for her. But to be honest, it wasn't like I was that devious or intelligent. It was just an intuitive feeling, and then somehow I understood that later, which was what I was trying to say about somehow understanding later why I do things, because I don't always know at the time. And in fact, it's very important that I don't know at the time sometimes. But Melina now, of course, because the story I tell in the book is that when I was an art student, I was living in Athens and was hanging around this squat. And there was one day there was an art student bought his 60mm film to show, and there was this suddenly this huge entrance, and in walked Melina Mccurry, and she was sat next to me, and the whole film was a fake document about the return of the Elgin marbles, or as she calls them, the Parthenon marbles, right, to Greece. And she was sitting there going, "Bravo, bravo!" And it was this beautiful moment, but an utter fiction. And so I had that connective thread to her, and it was fitting in relation to, of course, you know, what's going on with now, where, you know, objects are being returned from institutions, sure. Especially for the Getty and for, you know, obviously the British Museum, and, you know, somehow it has come full circle.
Right. Yeah, it was interesting to get to be able to read the text thereafter to understand the pull of this one, because it did seem like such an incidental snapshot that was kind of almost, I don't know, it wasn't like the rest of these stylized black and white, you know, prints that we found within the Alexander Lieberman.
Well, maybe he never took it. We don't know.
We don't know that. So the choice of medium for object 11.
Well, it's clear, obviously, it's me.
Of course.
So this is a foot of feet, as I call it. Mm-hmm. You know, a 35mm foot has 16 frames. Mm-hmm. I mean, as in a foot in measurement. Right. So this is 16 frames of feet from the special collections.
And this is one of those composites where you drew on a whole slew of archives, which is why I didn't list, but did you want to point out a couple? Or?
Well, I mean, the best one is Judy Chicago's foot. She's right. five in her boxing boot. She's 5 up from the bottom. Right. But, you know, in the key, it's every single object is listed. I mean, it's very meticulously listed, partly by you, Annie, and Michelle. And so do you want to, yeah, and oh, well, this is a big job. This is a big one. So I found, you know, again, of course, you know, I find these letters in the Heinrich Schwarz papers.
How did you come to those? How did you come to Schwarz?
Oh, okay, yeah, because David Hockney told me when I first came to LA, and I actually met David here. I hadn't met him before, of course. You know, and I told him about that I was the artist in residence and I was doing this research, and he actually told me to go and look at Heinrich Schwarz. And so I had him pulled out. I mean, in these 14 sort of linear feet of boxes. I mean, it's a huge collection. Right. And I only just touched the surface of it. And I found these 2 letters. And obviously, I am being British, I know all about Dauphin. And but I just thought it was a particularly beautiful correspondence. So you can all read it there. That so, but alongside this kind of, you know, Schwarz writing to Dauphin about this drawing that was on the cover, and then him replying that it's original. There was this photocopy, which is your next slide, Annie. And I thought, well, it kind of, I don't understand why that is so questionable, really, really. And then you did the research to go and actually find the watercolor that was on the front of the 50 drawings or whatever. And it was such a shock because, of course, when you actually see it, which you're going to show everyone now, it's clearly, to my eye, it looks like a forgery.
Very different Egon Schiele.
It's a kind of horrible drawing. And I pursued this quite, I mean, you know, the estate has, or Jane Collier, who sort of authenticates the drawing. She does, you know, she has come to the conclusion it's an anomalous one, maybe. But it's just, you know, even there's a kind of, what's it called? The pigtails.
Yes, there was a website you found called Pigtails and Paint, which is.
Yeah, I mean, which is a kind of, you know, slightly strange website, Pigtails in Paint. Need I say more? And even they dispute it. One person saying, I like this because it doesn't, this one is a nicer one because it doesn't have this, it doesn't have that, doesn't show too much genitalia and blah, blah, blah. And but the thing is that it was so disputed, the drawing at the time, not just by Schwarz, by everybody, that forever this drawing has an asterisk of disputed authenticity. It will. So, quite a long list of people thought it was a fake. And I have to say, it hasn't got, it is very strange.
Right.
So, not nice, not a good drawing. And then, Dear Father Hitler.
I know this is one of your favorites, so.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is two things. First of all, it's this letter written by Danny Ewing Greenberg, who was the son of, Clement Greenberg. As you can see, it was found in the Clement Greenberg papers. I mean, he must have been around 6 years of age, more or less, we think. It's undated, but just in terms of the war, the Japs, obviously, America's entered the war. And what I love about it, of course, is the fact that his mother wrote in Hitler in cursive script. So, but this is exactly what the letter, I copied it, 100 times. And, Dear Father Hitler and his men will soon be overpowered someday. And then it's underneath is this dream that Greenberg had typed up, also undated, probably from the war, probably even from the same time, because all this stuff was about the same time, I guess, about him witnessing the execution of Adolf Hitler. Is quite an extreme dream, very detailed, very kind of fascinating. And it's 8 sides long, which I hadn't quite understood until, because I, for many reasons, I only actually found the first 2 sides. And so we had it typed up on a vintage typewriter on this paper that I bought through the Rose Bowl. Thank God before the pandemic, I'd already started to accumulate all these vintage papers. Particularly because we were looking for the one for the art exam, and I found this paper, and we've got this, we managed to find in lockdown, one woman who was happy to type this up recto verso 100 times with mistakes and corrections. So it's so handmade, this stuff. I can't tell you, it's like lovingly made because of the pandemic. Without the pandemic, I don't know if this would have ever existed. So, so we have to, from my point of view, I have to thank the situation for at least that. So, but then and then I started to investigate what I could find out about Danny Ewing Greenberg, and it was practically nothing. But I did find out that he was a yippie, and possibly got deported for kind of invading the David Frost program in Britain. It's a kind of really, really strange story.
Where you have a personal connection.
Yeah, well, then we came to find out, and then that was the weirdest thing of all, is that just when I was going through newspapers and looking it all up, I saw that my mother's best friend was the research assistant on the program that day. But she died 2 years ago, so I've never asked her, obviously, or could have asked her, but never did. I didn't know about her sort of professional life. It's sad what you don't ask the next generation. So if there's any kids watching, ask now.
Cautionary tale. That's interesting, though, about the dream reproducing only the 2 of the 8 pages. I thought that was a conscious choice, trying to make it fragmentary, but I understand now that it was because you only had the 2 images, not the full 8 pages of the dream.
I did. I just didn't, as you know, I didn't open my manila I had all these
Your folders.
and I just never opened them. And you know, and as a result, I had that page, and that's the page I remember, and it's perfect that it is that long, because actually the dream gets a bit dodgy.
Yes.
So it's kind of that it kind of does go into some strange places. And I did read an extract for the record from a later bit, which I thought was fascinating, but it does go into a sort of rather strange middle period. So I'm glad I only found the first page.
Right.
And it kind of ends rather beautifully. It does end on a full stop, if I remember rightly. Oh, yeah, Greenberg became the sort of quite a character.
Factored in largely, I think, to a number of the objects.
Yeah. But, and do you have any of his drawings?
We can fast forward to some of those too, if we'd like to look. But
well, this is Dave. I mean, this is one of the objects on the left, and it's a photograph of a photograph that was found, that I didn't even find through, you know, the Clement Greenberg papers that I looked at. I just was looking over someone's shoulder at a you know, a seminar on sculpture and photography. And I just love that. I mean, just visually, I like, you know, and I'm obviously, being a Twombly fan, I'm hugely, anything that's got gesso on it attracts me. So, and I love the corrections like that. But then of course it uncovered a whole, you know, famous scandal when Clement Greenberg tried to remove all the paint from posthumously from David Smith's sculptures, because he said that he knew better. And it was a, you know, a huge issue. And yeah, and he had to, I think in the end he had to resign from being on the estate. And I mean, it was quite a big thing at the time. But it's so ironic that, you know, what caught my eye was the white paint on the photograph, and then, you know, it ended up being all about the removal of white paint. So, and yeah, and this is a sort of, you know, anyone who, it's kind of, none of the people who've so far exclaimed in public at what I had done to the Smith sculptures happens to have a self that I respect. I mean, that speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Which is right after Rosalind Krauss reveals this in Art in America in 1974. He writes this note, definitely revealing.
But I do think you should show a couple of the drawings, because they are.
I think I have, you know, I don't know that I have this composite one, which turned into another object.
Yeah, so the tree is one of his drawings. But basically, in this, we don't really know when, because they're undated, but there's a huge, you know, amount of these incredibly sort of figurative pen and ink drawings that are quite explicit, and, you know, and very sort of intestinal and strange. And it's fascinating for someone who was espousing, you know, abstract expressionism at the time. And so interesting character.
Definitely.
So yeah, and this is the record.
Right. So I was going to say that I recall when Michelle and I would get to this object, the description of this object in the key, we would always dread it, because I think it combines more than 20 different archives, elements from 20 different archives in it. And so how did you decide in the first place to make a record?
Well, because funnily enough, it was mainly because, as I said, we were trying to come up with different ways to carry an image. And I thought, record cover. You know, and then and obviously Monet Hates Me, and then there's Picasso doing Manet. I nearly changed that to Manet Hates Me.
Well, that's why Monet hates you, because you didn't include it.
Yeah, and this is, and on the back side that's John Paul Getty's hand coming in. I mean, it was just like, by this stage, it was quite at the end of the process. We were going quite sort of, you know, free fall in terms of the amount of images, combining images, combining sources.
Right.
and then the actual, when I was, working, in special collections, I collected so many kind of photocopies and extracts of things, and in the end, I just spoke. It has a sort of poem, kind of not really a poem actually, just a sort of collection of verbalized statements that I got from these research photocopies. That's the actual sound on it. So it's a 45, both sides, arse and tits.
I think those are from, what was it, the Prince of the French Revolution collection.
Yeah, exactly.
Some choice ones. And tell us about your connection to John Ruskin's archive.
Well, I found it through Clouds.
That's right.
And this was just moth damage, but it's just a found butterfly. I mean, how could you resist that? It's so extraordinary that, that has been eaten away, yet it still seems to read of a quiet afternoon. There still makes some sort of sense.
Right.
It's quite extraordinary, really.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were very, very poignant photographs of Ruskin do you have Miss Ackland? I
have that spread here, yeah.
Because there was this photograph that was, to be honest, Getty doesn't have a lot of Ruskin stuff, mainly just a few of his lectures.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this photograph, this album and photograph of Getty with Henry Ackland. And it just said, taken by Miss Ackland. And as you can see there, I says, Miss Ackland, I nearly overlooked her because, it turned out she was incredibly interesting, woman who was probably the first, person to travel with color photography. Mm-hmm. And to use color photography in portraiture. And yet she's just so nearly overlooked. It was quite fascinating. Her photographs are really beautiful, actually. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So she was a discovery. Right. And obviously, Ruskin, and especially in relation to weather.
You call him a cloud Cassandra, I think.
Yeah, cloud Cassandra, exactly. And we should get to, we've only got 1 minute. We're rattling through this. There's too much to say, but
you go to.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so much in this. This is Picasso's breasts. Mm-hmm. On the right is a sort of a hairball found in an ox's stomach from the Museum Britannicum, and on the left is an Amsterdam Pike drawing or a screen print. And obviously the hairy breasts. It's just a visual connection. Yes. They're stickers, and they're both different texture. Yeah, exactly. So you could see that. There you are. There's the Namjan Pike, and there's the. I got a lot from the Britannicum, which I thought was an absolutely fascinating book, and I think it was
about
that directed me to that. Mm-hmm. And there's also, I don't know if you have any of the other images. So there's the ball of hair, but there's also the coral hand. There's the lacrimatory or whatever, the thing you have to collect tears.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, just extraordinary stuff. And it was it was the beginning of the British Museum. It was a kind of curiosity.
Right. Should we move on to
Penis in the Bedroom,
as you coined it, which we'll forever call it? And on the right, I think this was an early prototype, maybe, that you had pinned up onto the window at the GRI, which comes from material in the Shunkender collection.
It's just a double exposure,
right?
And and it was two contact strips that were sheets that were exposed together. So which often happens, or used to happen with photochemical photography, is that you make a contact strip on a thing that had already been exposed, and only later do you find that out when you process it or develop it. And I can't resist this. It was so beautiful. It was just in it was actually just used to wrap other photographs. I mean, it was a complete rejection, but
It was like a discarded prints folder of ephemera.
yeah. I mean, that's where I head mostly, is anything that that looked a bit like it was discarded. I mean, that's on the periphery of things is where interest lies really often with me.
Certainly.
So, and then, I'm glad we're getting to Hendricks, because Hendricks was really important. Jeff and Beachy Hendricks. And this is the art exam, which I think, was in his folder in Getty, in the collections, but it seems that there was some fluidity between whether he or on how much they worked together and how much who inspired who. But it's a beautiful, dysfunctional art exam. I mean, this one, this is the more kind of well-behaved, but I think at the end it says things like, can you remember, like, I'd have to look it up.
I have to look it up. What was, like, can you think of a pair of words that would still be interesting for you after a year or something? I think that was one of a Beachy question. I'd have to look it up, but we can get to it.
I can't find it now, of course. But anyway, it was beautiful. It was a beautiful object. And that's why I went to the Rose Ball to try and find the paper.
Right.
And this is the poster of male artist hands. We can offer a quiz.
Right. I know
if
you like
get them all right, you get a copy of the book.
You like to quiz people. Want to give us a couple hints?
Well, okay. So it's Larry Bell on the left. Steve Klein, obviously. Warhol. Oldenburg. Ed Ruscha. George Segal, Duchamp, and Chagall.
Right.
There you go. That's a poster.
Right. Well, and I guess I think of this one as a rejoinder in some ways to the artist's hands, but do you want to tell us about this? And I love that you chose to keep the original.
It was another one of the photographs that was slightly was just being used to Lee Bonteque. And what I love about it is that she's really levitating. It's the most extraordinary image. She's got a woman with wings.
Right.
Yeah. So that's just that's a photochemical. And this is this is an alchemical image on the left.
So you have a text called Scheitzeit for this one.
Well, I sent that out. I used the front of I used that image to make a postcard during the pandemic, and I colored the pellet brown, diarrhea brown, and then I wrote, I stamped it with Scheitzeit and all these what was it called? Yeah, Anis Horribilis, and or Anus Horribilis, yeah. And I sent it as a little kind of missive to friends at a time of when we were all locked down, like Scheitzeit, we're in a Scheitzeit, shit is falling from the sky. That's all it was. It was
fitting hard.
But it was but we made another postcard of it. So that was the front side, and the other one was the back side of an actual invitation to go and attend an event, a Belgian surrealist event in the Swan in Brussels, by Dotremont. And that's forging his signature, and the owls are also taken from that's also a different object. And we even remade the rubber stamp to frank it.
Right.
And so the owl eyes came from from a Hendricks. No, not Hendricks. Heinrich Schwarz.
Yeah, Life magazine, I think.
Life magazine, and there's so much kind of detail in all this because we had the time to do that, really.
Right. Well, and I'm getting the the message that we need to answer a few questions, but the place obviously to read about all that detail you can find in the book. So let me see.
We've reproduced in the book the key and its extended key, actually.
Mhm.
Suddenly got incredibly dark.
I know you're in the darkness. Okay, so our first question from Sarah Dickinson is there anything you feel you see differently or look for now after the experience making this work?
Well, there's the anecdote that got away, which I found the other day, which is that, which isn't probably not quite what you mean, but it's the first thing that's coming to my head, is that there was this, with Heinrich Schwarz, there was a photograph that was already in negative, and of a man, an old man with very kind of deformed hands. And I thought it was a Van Gogh drawing because it just stylistically looked a lot like a Van Gogh drawing. But anyway, it turned out to be Picasso. And then I read this. I've got to read it. It's very, very funny. And I'm bear with me. I know probably me.
Yeah.
But the anecdote that got away, which I really wish I'd read.
To do a part 2.
Yeah, mind you, I'm having to try and find it in my iPhone now, so maybe it's not such a good idea. So you can carry on asking another. I've got to find this.
Okay. Well, while you're thinking of or trying to locate that, another question is what
No,
periphery?
I found it. Wait a minute. Oh no, I haven't. That's coronavirus. Sorry. Oh god. Anyway, can you paraphrase it, Anna? It was just like somebody said to because the actual drawing turned out to be a Picasso drawing of Renoir,
Right.
the painter, and somebody said, "How can you make such beautiful paintings with your
sensuous paintings?" I thought.
Sensuous paintings with such deformed hands."
Right.
And he said, "I use my dick." I wish I'd got that one in there because I wrote about that drawing actually. It's a shame I didn't know that. I don't know really, in answer to your question. I mean, not really. Not really, actually. I think, I would have loved to have, the little anecdotes that I wrote, I only just began to, I could have written many more. It was time and constraints meant that I had to stop.
Sure. And for our last question, because I'm seeing it's time, is what peripheries are you interested in exploring next?
Peripheries?
Mm-hmm.
Probably is I don't know them. That's the point. I don't know them yet.
Okay. To be determined. Well, I think Andrew is going to come on and close us out, but thank you very much for a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Annie.
Well, I just want to thank you both for a really terrific afternoon, and thank all of the audience for joining us and staying with us through the hour. And please pick up a copy of Monet Hates Me. I'm about halfway through and I can't tell you how much I'm enjoying it. So good night, everyone.
Good night.
Yeah.